Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Nerd Mode On, and today is Wednesday, so we have yet again another episode of Would You Rather. This is a video series where we will be going over approximately 5 questions and answering them in the most appropriate manner. So with the rules and guidelines reviewed, let's start off the episode. So coming in at our first Would You Rather question, I have, would you rather your partner have a homosexual affair or your partner have a heterosexual affair? Now, of course, I feel like the answer is a little bit one-sided, especially if you're a male. You know, the aspirations that you might have within your mind is to have a threesome with 2 females and yourself. So I feel like the answer is going to be a little bit easier for guys, but not everybody is going to agree on certain sections of that. But by itself, I feel like having my partner have a homosexual affair would be a little bit easier, and it would be a peace of mind when it comes down to it, and I think I would just be able to deal with the action a little bit easier knowing that they just had their enjoyment and I was the only person to ever go inside. So I guess that's kind of how I'm going to answer that, and I think that's how I would feel no matter the circumstance. Coming in at our second question, I have, would you rather only talk in third person or never be able to call someone by their name? Now, for me personally, I don't feel like talking in third person would necessarily be a bad thing. I feel like you would still be able to get your message across, and I feel like most people would be able to coincide with you, and they wouldn't have too much of a big deal. Of course, it would be a little awkward at first, but I feel like your friends would still be able to understand what you're trying to say, and in many cases, they would just get used to it. Now, of course, with that said, not being able to call someone by their name would be a big deal because you'd be using words like, hey, you, and stuff like that, and that just wouldn't be professional in many cases, and I feel like most people would be turned off by those actions. Coming in at our third question, I have, would you rather die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain? And as much as I want to almost say I would like to see myself become the villain in many cases, considering that it would be interesting to look back on your life and wonder how you got from being a good person to a bad person in many cases, but I feel like being a villain has way too many repercussions and way too many negatives to be associated with myself, and in many cases I don't feel like doing the time for an action that was probably pretty horrific by itself. So I guess with that kind of discussed, I guess I'd rather die the hero, considering that there's always going to be a lot of people writing about you and you're always going to be looked upon in the highest regard when it comes down to being a hero in our society. Coming in at our fourth question, I have, would you rather be the first to climb Mount Everest or be the first on the moon? And I feel like the easy answer for myself would be the first on the moon, considering that it is an absolute huge accomplishment for the human race, and it's an accomplishment that we're probably going to hold dear to our hearts for many decades to come, and I don't imagine it leaving our hearts anytime soon. Now, of course, with that said, being the first to climb Mount Everest is still a very important thing, and it was definitely very revolutionary for its time, but I feel like it's not as important as being the first person on the moon, considering that everybody knows who you are, and it's taught in history class in many circumstances, considering that that's a very huge accomplishment. And finally, coming in at question 5, I have, would you rather eat a zombie or be eaten by a zombie? Now, of course, with that said, I feel like the easy answer would be to eat a zombie, considering that I don't feel like having my flesh torn off by people eating it with their teeth, so in many cases I feel like eating the zombie is going to be a better option. Now, of course, with that said, I'm hoping that I don't get an infection from eating them, considering that when rotten flesh is kind of walking around in many cases, it tends to pick up a lot of things that normally you wouldn't find on your body. But I guess in many cases I can just drench it with barbecue sauce and call it a good day, and hopefully I won't get ill and die from it, or in many cases turn into a zombie myself. So fingers crossed, and wish me the best of luck. But anyway, guys, when it comes down to the main gist of it, this has been this episode of Would You Rather. Of course, if you guys would like to answer the questions for yourself, feel free to look in the description of the video to find all the questions written down below. And of course, if you guys are interested, feel free to recommend some questions for next week's episode. I do take your guys' submissions as priority 1, so you always have a really good chance of getting in the episode if that's something you aspire to do. But when it comes down to the main gist of it, guys, this has been this episode of Would You Rather, and until the next episode, guys, this has been NMO, and I'm going to be signing out, guys. Peace.